Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, well, it's been a while since we've done a show, honestly. So first and foremost, I was supposed to be on vacation last week. Instead, I'm going to be on vacation next week. So going to be a little bit sporadic on the next for the next couple shows here, but we hope to get one off for Wednesday and Friday as well. So that's our game plan right now. Today, we're going to start with Randy Moss, since this is something that Drew and I have talked quite a bit about, throughout the football season. And then, by the time he was actually announced into the Hall of Fame, we were more focused on the games at hand. So we're going to talk a little bit about Randy Moss. Couple coaching moves that have already been made. You guys are well aware of those, so we'll get more in depth in that stuff. And that's kind of the plan here. We'll finish off with some Twitter questions like we always do and get you guys out of here in a flat 30 to 45, something like that. So let's start it off here with Randy Moss. I feel like most of you guys know my opinion on Randy Moss at this point, so I'm going to let you start, and we'll kind of roll from there.
I mean, yeah, he's the greatest of all time in my opinion. Talent-wise, impact on the game. There was nobody that had a greater, magnitude to the position of wide receiver than Randy Moss. Again, we'll talk about Jerry Rice and the numbers and the greatness he achieved. Certainly is probably a little bit better just because he's got the rings, he's got the records and everything. But what Randy Moss was able to do to completely change the way defenses played and try to defend speedy receivers that kind of change will never be seen again. So, there was some controversy as to whether he'd be first ballot or not. I think a lot of that was because of his off-field stuff and whatnot. But he deserved it. And Terrell Owens got into that was also a big one for me. I was very skeptical about that. I'm very rattled right now because BJ's recording me on his phone. I don't know what that's about, but I tried to ignore it and it didn't. But yeah. But anyway, point being here, Randy Moss deserved first ballot Hall of Fame. I'm glad he got it. I'm glad the voters got that right because there was some skeptical people about, if the voters would get that right after not getting T.O. in the year before. So good to see him get in because, again, I think he's the greatest of all time.
I absolutely agree. I've made this argument for probably too long. I think this argument for me started way back when he was released by the Childress group and he went down to Tennessee. That was kind of, for me, when I was like, okay, someone's making decisions here that are not the right ones.
Yeah.
Because I get the whole thing with Randy Moss's personality. I really, really do get it. He's explosive, not just on the field, but as a personality as well. He takes things to heart. That's how it seems to me. And kind of the actions that he had throughout his career do not define the character of the person. We've seen Randy Moss on ESPN now. We've seen him do kind of a lot of different things after his career to show that his talent isn't just limited to being on the football field. He's actually very charismatic as well. I think he's funny. I laugh at a lot of the things that he says. The You Got Moss segment is phenomenal. I love that. And I think that, I think he's...
That's something we should even touch on that. The fact that his name is a verb now.
Yeah.
Right there, nobody says you got riced.
No.
You got mossed.
Because so let's just have that art. Do you want to have it out with Jerry Rice and Randy Moss? I mean, we might as well. It's the offseason.
We're on the same side of it. So is it?
This is kind of where. So that argument, I get it, right? I say this a lot in the sense that, you know what you're getting from both of these players. They're just two different types of receivers. Jerry Rice is arguably the greatest of all time as well. I'm going to listen to all of those arguments because they're entirely correct. They're just two different types of greatest of all time, in my opinion. So the way that I look at this is that Randy Moss, and this is also the Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady argument as well. Randy Moss is the most talented wide receiver that I have ever personally bear witness to. The only other arguments are Terrell Owens and Calvin Johnson, to me. So I look at those two guys, I look at those three receivers, and I see the most complete players that we've ever seen. Guys that literally changed the game today. You can't run press coverage against Randy Moss. He's going to run by you, but you can't run off because he's going to run a slant over the middle and catch it with his hands. Like there's nothing you can do to stop that guy one-on-one. You have to game plan around him, and he did that for how many different teams? Is it 4, right? With Tennessee, New England. Yeah. I mean, that to me is a generational talent that will never die. He literally changed the game of football. That's why he's the greatest of all time. And then Jerry Rice is probably the most precise route runner that I've ever watched. You can make an argument for Moss as well here, but for Jerry Rice specifically, being a relatively undersized receiver, not having the freak abilities that Randy Moss has, I suppose, that makes him great in a different way. He changed the game too, but it's easier for Randy Moss to change the game than it is for Jerry Rice. Let's just put it that way. So whoever makes it look easier, in my head, is the guy that's the better player. And so that's why I say Randy Moss. But again, they're both in the Hall of Fame. Like
right.
it's not it's not an argument of who's better to me. It's a matter of which guy fits more schemes, and Randy Moss is timeless.
Well, I mean, think about it this way: if you're drafting a team of all-time greats right now to, I guess, put together, and you only got one receiver to pick, I would assume you'd go with the guy that has the most talent, because I mean, in that instance, you don't really know who your quarterback's going to be. Like I said, I would take Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I would probably not take Emmitt Smith at running back just because he's got the cumulative records for rushing, but that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that he's just all, above the greatest, or all and above, everybody else as the greatest running back of all time.
Right.
I think, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, Earl Campbell, Eric Dickerson, there's so many others that you could put in there. So, I mean, and again, we're a lot of times we're apples to apples arguing here, considering how the level of greatness of these guys. But Randy Moss, for sure, he does definitely deserve first ballot Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Obviously, that, again, like you said, the greatest of all time argument can be had for a lot of different ways. But I think it's cool that he is being recognized mostly as a Viking, even though it's kind of like in New England he had his best career season with Tom Brady, but he was. I mean, he really changed the game those first couple of years in Minnesota. That's kind of when he really made his mark on the NFL and the history of the league, because cover 2 became a thing essentially because of him. Instead of having one deep safety, they had to bring 2 in. Now you're seeing cover 3 even a lot more often. Yeah,
and you look at with Randy Moss, and this was a kind of like, I think it was a meme or it was a joke, or I took it as a joke, I guess. Someone said the statement that Randy Moss comes into the league and forced a Hall of Fame wide receiver to be a number 2, and that's funny.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's funny, but that's also like you can make a real argument for that. Like,
that's what happened.
I mean, who was the number 1 target, Chris Carter or Randy Moss? And when Randy Moss was 21 when he entered the league, I believe, something like that. When he was 21 and Chris Carter was 28, or I don't know what the age disparity is there, but that doesn't really matter. You know what the point that I'm making. Randy Moss was still the target most of the time. He was the guy that was getting the jump balls. He was the people. I love this argument. People always like to say, if you had one guy to throw the ball to and you need a first down or you need a touchdown or whatever it is, who's the first receiver that comes to mind? It has to be Randy Moss. It has to be. It just does. So I guess if you're saying who's going to catch a first down slant on 3rd and 8, maybe Jerry Rice, because Jerry Rice, by all accounts, was unbelievable at running those intermediate routes and those short routes. But Randy Moss is just I have no words for some of the things that he was able to do. And so to me, that's why he's the GOAT. That's why he's the a first ballot Hall of Famer and a deserving first ballot Hall of Famer. This is why I advocate so hard for this guy all the time, because it's not about the straight cash homie or the walking off the field or the moon. Like, those things are all fine because I think they're funny, but there are a lot of people out there that do not think that stuff's funny for whatever reason. I don't know what's wrong with those people, but that's the case in the world today. And you can't vote a guy in because he got pissed off because a bunch of Packers fans were mooning him. Like, I'm sorry, that I would get mad too. Like, that would fire me up. And maybe Green Bay should learn not to taunt the greatest of all time. That's what I would say on that front. So from there, let's move into some current Vikings news. Or I guess it's not exactly current, but we're rolling with it right now. John DeFilippo, I believe is how you pronounce that name. He is now the offensive coordinator here in Minnesota. And I've seen mixed reviews here. I've seen a lot of people be very excited about it, and I think that's kind of the right way to lean right now. And I've also seen some people being like, all right, this guy accomplished a lot in Philadelphia, but we still lost Shermer. I don't trust this offense. And I think that that's also a fair take as well. Because this guy's going to come in with the highest expectations, like the highest. This team's coming off an NFC North an NFC North title, an NFC Championship game appearance. He's got all these weapons on offense. You look at the way the Eagles were constructed, and they also have a ton of weapons on offense. So we're looking at kind of it's an apples to apples things as opposed to an apples to oranges argument, like Drew said earlier. So I look at all the pieces in place, and this guy's going to have high expectations right from the get go. But I do look at him and think, all right, this is probably a guy who can adjust quickly because there's been a lot of people that are connecting him to Sean McVay, which I think is a good comparison because he's an innovative young head coach, and that type of thing seems to ring true for. Or it has rang true as of late with guys like McVay, guys like Kyle Shanahan. Mm-hmm. So I'm confident in this hire. The question for you, I guess, is, what does he bring to the table that Pat Shurmur possibly did not?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that's kind of a little bit underrated here is that he has some experience and knowledge of the Vikings, a couple of the Vikings quarterbacks anyway on the roster already. I mean, he worked a little bit with Sam Bradford and Philly before the trade in 2016, but I mean he did get some familiarity there. We don't know the situation with Bradford and returning to the Vikings, but and then I think from what I've heard anyway, he was also influential for Oakland drafting Derek Carr back in 2014, and I would assume a lot of work was done on Teddy Bridgewater there as well during that draft season for Oakland. So I'm sure he's got a well-informed opinion on each of these quarterbacks. And, and again, we know what he did with Carson Wentz this season and Nick Foles this season as well in the playoffs. I mean, he's obviously very instrumental, and he's very well respected around the league. The Cleveland offense 2015, with how many different quarterbacks was there in that year, like Josh McCown, Manziel. I don't know how many guys there was, but that offense ran fairly well considering the personnel that he had to work with. Right. So, he's very well respected around the league, and you can look around the league on whatever website you want to of the most respected sites and experts around the NFL, and you're gonna get a good grade for this hire. So it sounds good. A lot of people are even expecting one and done, and he's gonna be a head coach in 2019. I don't know about that, but this guy certainly seems to have he's very well respected. Seems to have a good cloud around him. So I think the Vikings nailed it with this hire. And you could tell the Vikings really wanted to get this guy because they kept waiting through all these rules and waiting periods and, after the parade and they went to Philly and all of this stuff. So they clearly wanted this guy, and they made the hire.
Yeah, and you see kind of the thing that I looked at when he was brought in was I immediately went to kind of the film breakdowns and stuff that were available. That was what I looked at immediately. And there's a segment, I believe it was Bleeding Green Nation, that had the article on it. I don't remember the writer's name, but there was a video in there with I'm going to call him Philly Cheese. That's going to be my name for him. There's a video in there with Philly Cheese where he was talking about Zach Ertz, and he was talking about how he is able to kind of manipulate a defense. And I see a lot of similarities between Kyle Rudolph and Zach Ertz, and it's not because they're two white tight ends. Like, don't give me that. Like, they are similar players in the sense that they're not really that fast, but they're able to find ways to get open in one-on-one situations by kind of setting up defenses, right? And so I look at the way that Ertz was used in Philly's system, and I think that translates well to what Kyle Rudolph is good at doing. Now, I've done this before with Norv Turner. We talked about how Kyle Rudolph could be Norv Turner's Antonio Gates. I remember talking about that however long ago, and that was not true. That did not come to fruition at all. But the kind of the tough reality here is that Antonio Gates and Kyle Rudolph probably aren't similar players. They're both big, hulking tight ends that can make tough catches, but Antonio Gates was a basketball player. You guys know that, right? I think we've heard that enough, right? I mean,
every single time a tight end shows up on screen, and he played basketball. It's not to bring it up, right? I mean, it's almost an obligation at this point. You have to bring that up. So
right,
I heard it hundreds of times with Antonio Gates.
Yeah, so I mean, that comparison doesn't that's one of those comparisons for me where I said it a couple years ago and now I'm correcting it because I'm like, I just don't see Kyle Rudolph as Antonio Gates, but I do see him as Zach Ertz. And so that's something that we'll look to test this year. But I do think that the way that he fits in this offense, combined with guys like Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Jarius Wright even. You can look at Treadwell and Floyd if they can decide to expand to more 2, 3, and 4 wide receiver sets. There's a lot of different things you can do with an innovative mind. And not just an innovative mind, but a new age, contemporary innovative mind. So I really like this hire. I'm a huge fan of it. I'm excited to kind of get to know Coach Philly Cheese here over the next couple months and see what he has to say and what he can do with this offense. But as it stands today, man, this guy looks like the real deal, and I'm very excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, given the coaching tree he's worked under, looking back at, Doug Peterson, honestly, and then in Cleveland, and then in Oakland, I mean, I would assume a lot of what his offense is going to be is West Coast stuff, which, plays into the quarterback options right now for the Vikings. I mean, obviously Bradford, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, Cousins. I mean, who else would there be? Any of these rookies, I guess, if you wanted to go that far. But, it seems like he's not that far, or not that much different than the offensive Vikings have run the past couple of years with Shermer anyway. So, from that angle, I'd like that there's going to be some continuity there. Again, obviously it's brand new coach, brand new style, I guess, of executing it. But, when you have, and again, I think his personnel is somewhat similar too. I mean, in the running back group from Philly, when you had Ajayi, kind of a do-it-all type guy, and you have Blunt and Clement. You have Blunt kind of, Latavius Murray, you're kind of inside ground and pound runners. You have Clement and McKinnon, you're kind of scat back receiving types. And then on the outside, you have a bunch of talented receivers. You have your Ertz and Rudolph comparison there. I think he can do a lot of the same things in Philly that, Doug Peterson was executing for play calling purposes. He can do a lot of the same things here in Minnesota. So, it's a good hire. I think that's a heck of a hire. And I think I am very excited about it.
All right, then. So let's move on to the other coaching thing, I suppose, and that was that Kevin Stefanski, who was the quarterback's coach for the Vikings. They requested an interview in New York, and if we remember correctly, that's where Pat Shurmur just went. So it makes a whole lot of sense for Shurmur to try to bring over staff members that he worked well with, and the Vikings blocked that move. So I've seen a couple of different things here from this. So I'm gonna I'm gonna say this out loud. The Vikings should not be like, fans should not look at the Vikings and be like, we're above this. Like, he's under contract. It's like, if he's under contract with the Vikings they're allowed to do this. This is their decision. So it probably pissed him off. I don't know that.
Be upset at the rule. Be upset at the rule first.
Right. And that's kind of how I would look at that. It's a tough situation for Stefanski because, of course, he wants that interview. Of course, he wants to advance his career. But ultimately, it comes down to what the Vikings want. And what the Vikings want is to win more football games. And so he should look at that, I guess. If you want to look at this in a positive light from his vantage point, that means that the Vikings value you. And that's what I take away. And that's what I would kind of express to our listeners and fans and everyone, really, is that if you get turned down, it's probably because the team that has you already wants you to stick around. So that's just a situation where it's tough for Coach, but at the same time, it's also a good thing for the Vikings moving forward here.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what's the rule say? Something about like a lateral. The team when the guy's under contract, the team can deny permission for an interview for a lateral move, in quotes, which, according to the rule, all assistant coaches, position coaches, coordinators, whatever, are all assistant coaches. They're not there's no other further level of breakdown there. There's either head coach or assistant coach. And so technically, QB coach to offensive coordinator is not a promotion. It's just it's a lateral move. And that's why the Vikings are able to block it. So, and I think that's, like you said, it shows how much the Vikings value this guy as a potential, maybe a future offensive coordinator for the Vikings. Again, if Dave Filippo ends up getting a head coach job, who knows? We don't know anything about Mike Zimmer's health. Obviously, he's had some scares lately. Maybe his time is up soon, and maybe Dave Filippo takes over as head coach, or George Edwards does. But I mean, the point is, having Stefanski stick around for a guy that's been around the team for 10 years or whatever it is. I mean, when they still want him to stick around like that, I think it means something. So, the rule says they can block it. He's under contract. I can see why it'd be kind of why Stefanski might take that a little weirdly, just because, I've been so loyal to you guys forever. Let me get my chance here. But I really think his time as an offensive coordinator is coming very soon, whether it be next year, very soon after that, because he deserves it for sure. So, there are a couple ways to look at it, but I think the Vikings did what they probably have to do here, is keep the guy that they really think is going to be a really good coach, and they want to keep that continuity there.
Absolutely. So that about wraps up kind of the meat of the show here. So let's jump into some Twitter questions here. What do you got for me, Drew?
Yeah, we asked for these earlier this afternoon here. We got a lot of stuff about the quarterback position. So
let's start there.
That's going to be our off season, right? Let's see. We have some questions from Luke Reitgens. He asked about the DeFilippo hiring. We kind of already talked about that. And then he has two questions here. He says, who do you want as the Vikings starting quarterback next season? And who do you think will be the Vikings starting quarterback next season as of right now?
Okay, so I'm going to start this off. I said this before, but I'm going to start this off by saying I have never seen anything like this quarterback situation before. Never. Like there is not a good way to handle this, and I do not envy the position that any of the Vikings upper management is in, because you have two guys in Teddy Bridgewater and Case Keenum, Sam Bradford, who seems like he's probably going to be gone. Between those three guys, plus Kyle Sloter, who has received raving reviews from the Broncos organization and from just about everyone else that has gotten a glimpse of him, and then you have resources too. You might be able to get a guy like Lamar Jackson, for example, or Baker Mayfield even, if he slips in the draft. So you look at all the options that the Vikings have right now, and the simple answer here is that I don't even know what I would want. You just need to do more work on it, I suppose. So I looked at the Kirk Cousins situation, and I was like, I like what he does, but that's a guy that I need to see more of. And the biggest issue here is that Bridgewater and Keenum are two guys that they have such small sample sizes that I don't really know what to think, especially with the new offense coming in. Now, looking at Philly Cheese and looking at what he has been able to do, I think both Bridgewater and Keenum could accomplish a lot within this offense. That's kind of what I see. I think both those guys are capable of doing well. And I guess I probably lean Bridgewater still, just because, again, I've been saying this forever. I'm just going to keep going at this point. I think that Bridgewater has the higher potential. But I'm also willing to recognize that it's very possible that neither of these guys are the one. There's a reason why you make an argument for both players being kind of incentive-laden deals, I think. So
yeah,
it's hard to say. It's really hard to say, but I still lean Bridgewater, and I might change that at some point, but I'm leaning Bridgewater, and that's the guy that I see right now, barring anything in free agency, barring anything in the draft, barring anything in training camp or whatever it is. Bridgewater is the guy that I think fits this new offensive style best.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was looking through Twitter yesterday, and I saw Darren Wolfson had replied to somebody about a quarterback question for the Vikings, and I think he said something along the lines of the love for Teddy in the front office and in the coaching staff is legit. So that tells me that when Spielman and Mike Zimmer went to interview JDF Dave Filippo, they had a discussion about this guy, about Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm assuming they didn't walk away from that interview without Dave Filippo being at least open to Teddy as a starter, even with the injury, even with all that. So right now, I think Teddy is the most likely scenario as the starting quarterback for the Vikings. That doesn't mean Kirk Cousins won't happen. That doesn't mean Case Keenum franchise tag won't happen. I think personally that tagging Keenum is the safest option, just because there's so much injury risk with Teddy. There's the financial risk with Kirk Cousins. A 1-year commitment for Case Keenum might be the safest option. But I really think that again, I've said this before. I don't think you can really go wrong here. Case Keenum just led the Vikings to an NFC Championship game. We know what Teddy Bridgewater could do in a limited offense 2 years ago. Kirk Cousins obviously has proven himself to be a very solid, high-volume passer. And given a better supporting cast in Minnesota, who knows what his limit is. So, and with the new coaching staff and a kind of a young, willing to prove himself coach here, I think there's really no wrong answer here. And that's not just me being politically correct. That is me saying the Vikings are going to be good next year, regardless of who the quarterback is.
Certainly seems
so
that way.
I still have no reason to believe. And again, I'll add this part in too. Even if the Vikings do go get Kirk Cousins on what would be a large, very large contract, they can still retain a lot of those key, guys that need extensions. Diggs, Hunter, Kendricks, Barr, Trey Waynes. I mean, these guys, they can get almost all of those guys back still. So if there's any concern about that in your kind of, when you're breaking this down for yourself, there's almost no penalty there if they do bring in Kirk Cousins. It's basically just how you feel about the player. If you want to pay the guy or pay a quarterback now or give a year or two of a wait. But we'll answer one more here because a lot of the other questions we got were about the quarterback stuff, and we kind of covered it there. An interesting one here from our buddy. The Twitter name is Stephen A. Smith. It's at StevePa27. The talk is about Dave Filippo helping the offense, but do you see Zimmer picking his brain to see how he schemed against the Vikings defense and the tendencies they identified? That's actually a good question because I think there's probably some truth to that.
Well, he should. You look at the situation. The Vikings got whomped. They got whomped. And if you're Mike Zimmer, you have to look at that situation and basically say, all right, we got beat. We got beat really bad. And now we get to bring this guy over. It's sort of like the Kevin Durant situation that everyone hated so much, where he left Oklahoma City to go to Golden State, and everyone was like, oh, that's a soft move or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of like the reverse of that, I guess, where Philly Cheese over here comes over from Philadelphia, and he has the opportunity to work with let's call them comparable personnel, I suppose. And I would have to say that Mike Zimmer should talk to him about whatever the hell happened there, because why wouldn't you? What's the worst thing that could happen by just asking the guy, hey, how did you beat the hell out of me? So that's kind of how I would handle.
I'm very curious about. I mean, this is obviously 6 months, 7 months in advance, but I'm very curious about how much, if at all, the read option, zone read stuff is going to, or the run pass option stuff is going to come over to Minnesota, because given the options Vikings have,
that's super interesting because
Vikings have the options like Bridgewater, Keenum, these guys, Kirk Cousins, these guys are all capable of running that, right? Like, they're mobile enough, and I think they've done it before to a degree,
See, that's interesting to me, because the last time we saw kind of the run pass option, like, flash, I suppose, was with Chip Kelly, also in Philadelphia, right? If I have that right.
Yeah.
And that fizzled out real quick. It was fun for a while, and now Chip Kelly has moved on to a couple of different jobs, I believe, since then. So, I'm under the belief that nothing works forever in the NFL. That's just how it is. The Tampa 2 is dead as far as I'm concerned. You look at
Leslie Frazier.
The West Coast offense was dead for a while there with the Air Coryell kind of schemes dominating vertically. Now the Vikings appear to be one of the teams bringing back that West Coast style. And what's nice about that is that Coach Flip here brings over the similar style from what I can see. So, yeah, dude, it's interesting. This is really fun to me. Like, I really like the idea of Mike Zimmer and his new coach here working together to kind of figure out, first of all, what went wrong with the Vikings in that game, but kind of having the hands-on perspective from someone in that Philadelphia locker room. That's invaluable to me. Yeah. So it'd
be fun to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, just to see, how much of this is the Vikings just showing up flat and not performing, or if it's really just getting out coached, or if it's, I'm sure it's a combination of both to a degree, but
I want to know,
that'd be very interesting to hear.
I want to know really bad. I want to know what happened when they actually first like met, right? Like when they came together for the first time as two Vikings coaches and looked each other in the eye.
If I was Dave Filippo, I would have given a big, oh, look at my ring here. Just kind of like, I got this big ring. Like, have you seen the Frank Caliendo Jon Gruden impersonations where the ring is like the size of his hand and it's just staying there? Yeah. I'm sure JDF did the same thing as he walks into that interview.
Why wouldn't he? I'm sure Mike
Zimmer...
Zimmer...
Probably with booze all over himself from that parade, too, because I'm pretty sure the interview was right after the parade in Philly.
I feel very confident that Mike Zimmer would like that approach, too, where it's just like...
Oh, yeah.
It just seems like Mike Zimmer's style. So I did get a couple questions here that I want to knock out... Well, I guess two of these from questions that I got specifically to my account.
Okay.
The first one being about Jerick McKinnon and Tony Sparano, and I'm trying to read the exact thing here so I get it right. But basically, this is from Josh Swedlin at Swedeskull. He said, according to the theory of the multi-universe, in one reality, Sparano was promoted to ROC, and the plan will be to re-sign McKinnon as our full-time Wildcat quarterback. In this scenario, how many games do the Vikings win? So I think, first and foremost, I'm aware that this is a joke. Let's just put that out there, that this is going to be a joke now. And this is hilarious because I hate the Wildcat more than just about anyone ever. And I complain about it all the time because it doesn't work, like, consistently. It will never work consistently. Like, unless McKinnon all of a sudden has Ben Roethlisberger's arm or Aaron Rodgers' arm, like, hell, if he has Nick Foles' arm, I don't know. But unless he has that, like, it's not going to work for more than a couple of plays. So I'm going to say 4 games with that in that scenario. 4. Because McKinnon is great as a running back. Like, I shouldn't say great, I suppose. He's getting closer and closer to being a featured back.
Let's make sure our facts are correct here. Jerick McKinnon was a college quarterback at Georgia Southern.
I understand that.
Quarterback might be in quotations because
of
the way he played through, like, he threw like 6 attempts a season.
Okay.
But
he's no Antoine Randall.
Florida. He did beat Florida. I remember that one game where I think that offense literally didn't attempt to pass, and they won that game. But no, I mean, I don't know. I'll give the Vikings like 7 wins. That'd be fun. It'd be fun to see.
I'm going to say 4 because of McKinnon, and I'll bump it up 2 more because I want to include Sparano in here because I think this is a guy that doesn't get enough credit for the work that he does too. So I want to talk about him real quick. And I'm going to go back to when we were at training camp because this is kind of when my perception of Tony Sparano was a lot different before he got to Minnesota. Once he got to Minnesota and I was able to see kind of the way that he actually works, I began thinking that this is a very good spot for him to be in Minnesota. Now, do I believe that he should be the offensive coordinator? No, because I'm not sure that that's what he is cut out to do, I suppose. But at the same time, I do like him. He's very hands-on. So when we were watching the offensive linemen do shoots at training camp, Sparano got down real low, and he was, like, in their grill. Like, I don't know what he was saying, but it wasn't awesome, I'll tell you that much. And he was on eye level with these guys, getting in their face, being like, exactly the right technique that you want to use. So to me, that's a player's coach because if the players are doing what he's saying, they clearly respect him, and they respect him in that regard, right? So the reason why I wouldn't want to promote him to offensive coordinator in this alternate universe that you're speaking of is simply because I don't know if he can call plays or not. To me, an offensive coordinator is generally going to be the guy that calls the plays. He calls the shots from the offensive perspective, especially since we know that Mike Zimmer is doing the defensive side of the football, and we have a kind of a good sample size at this point to understand that Zimmer likes to allow his offensive guys to do their thing as opposed to him trying to control everything and micromanage. So I love Sparano and I love McKinnon. I just don't think that that's an offensive style.
Well, yeah.
I guess a format that has a shot of winning more than 6 games.
It had its time in the league.
Right.
Back, was it 2009,
Miami?
8?
When Miami was
like
doing
that,
it with...
and it was Sparano.
Ronnie Brown. Was it Ronnie Brown? Yeah.
Yeah, Ronnie Brown. Trying to think who else was on that squad. There was one of the other runners was... Anyway, I think my favorite part about Tony Sparano is that he wears sunglasses 24/7. I respect that move. I respect that. It's like it's like PFT commenter sort of. You just kind of keep yourself hidden, but at the same time, like wearing sunglasses is such a power move. So I love that.
I like that.
Big Sparano fan. Yeah.
And then the other question here that I got, and I apologize, I don't remember who was that I can't find it in my mentions right now, so I'm just going to kind of brief it. It's, any sleeper prospects. This is very early in draft season, I suppose. And I said this on Twitter already, so I'll repeat it
Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I'll repeat this for the folks that didn't see my account or whatever. I have probably only watched like 20 or 30 players at this point. So sleeper is a relative term to BJ Reidell right now because I don't even know what a sleeper is at this point. But the names that I will throw out there immediately are Rashad Penny, the running back from San Diego State. My God, can that guy run? I think that he's the type of guy that's going to start as a sleeper and eventually kind of bulk up and continue to impress as he goes through the combine process. So I really like him. And then the other sleeper for me, kind of the other one that I'm confident in if he gets the opportunity, is Antonio Callaway from Florida. And I've talked about him multiple times on a couple of different shows, and his arrest situation is not awesome. I hope this guy gets another chance, but he could have already blown it. That's something I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I really like his talent, and I know that people are going to say immediately, like, hey, like, you're comparing him to Percy Harvin because he's from Florida, but he has a lot of Percy Harvin traits. He's relatively short. I believe he's 5'11". He's very versatile, runs out of the slot well, runs routes from the outside well. He can go deep. He can catch it over the middle. He's a tough player. He's got getaway speed. I've seen Jordan Reed say this a lot, that he is maybe the most talented wide receiver in the entire class. So I think there's a Tavon Austin argument here, and I think there's also a Percy Harvin argument. So it depends on which one you see in Antonio Callaway, and I tend to lead Percy Harvin. So those are the two major sleepers, and I'll let you talk about Dallas Goedert because I think it's pretty clear that you like him.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's honestly, this is just from watching South Dakota State football because I am with you that I have not looked at prospects a lot this spring. So, but yeah, I watched South Dakota State a few times this year, and that guy he has Gronk potential. So I think it'd be, and again, the Vikings have a pretty solid tight end situation already. Kyle Rudolph made the Pro Bowl. David Morgan is a very versatile jack of all trades backup guy. There's a bunch of good options there, but I think Dallas Goedert has potential to be a generational player, and that's why I think having a weapon like that it'd be a huge benefit to whoever the new quarterback is. I mean, whoever the Vikings go there, what the offense would be without Dalvin Cook coming in the mix, having a weapon like that to win one-on-one and have that kind of matchup problem. Oh yeah, I'm up for it. So, and he's going to be a first-round guy, I think, for sure. If he's there at 30 for the Vikings, I think you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's tight ends are interesting.
And again, this is very early. Right. I mean, we have almost more than 2 months before the draft, so there's a lot of work to be done yet.
These opinions will be swirling throughout. We can go. We'll be I promise you that we will be wishy-washy on this subject because that's the nature of the draft. It really is. It's just. It's a lot of trying to figure out what's going on, and it's a lot of talking to people and just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for the Vikings, I suppose. So I do like those three players. I'm going to throw out one more, and this is going to be I would consider this to be a fire take because I don't know anything about this guy beyond the fact that I watched one game of him before this show so that I could come up with a true sleeper. That's Equanius St. Brown. I'm probably butchering that name, probably. And he's a wide receiver from Notre Dame, number 6. I looked at one game of his tape earlier, and I liked what I saw from him in terms of running routes and doing kind of the technical things well. So I would consider him to be a very deep sleeper at this point and a potential riser, but at the same time, he was so far down the board on CBS Sports. Like if you're a casual football fan, you wouldn't even get to this guy's name. The reason why I picked him out is because Notre Dame wide receivers tend to turn out pretty well for the most part. We've seen a lot of different Notre Dame guys come in and be able to kind of let's say have success earlier in their career. I think that makes the most sense here, and Notre Dame also works very well with tight ends too. So, you look at the kind of those two position groups and how similar they are in terms of creating leverage, and I immediately was drawn to this guy that, again, I have no idea how to say his name correctly, but Equanius something or another. I like his potential. So,
Equanius something or another. That's good.
Something like that. So we can round it out there. That's about all I've got in terms of what we've been working with here. So, like I said at the top of the show, I am going on vacation tomorrow, so I'm going to be gone for the entire week. The goal is to kind of record over the internet while I am out of town, so hopefully we will have a show up on Wednesday and Friday. But if it's not, I hope that you guys don't get too pissed off at us, because I'm planning on having fun on vacation, so I apologize in advance for that. So that's about all I got here. As always, you can find our work, where you can find it. I haven't been writing that much. I don't know if Drew has, but Vikings Territory and Zone Coverage are the two places to find that stuff. And then, yeah. Any final closing thought? You want to give me a closing statement?
Closing statement. How about this? If you're listening to this, send your Pizza Ranch opinions to my Twitter account, because I had a big heated argument with some of my roommates, and there's some very different.
What were you arguing? While
I was arguing that Pizza Ranch is phenomenal. Did you
see that thing about Little Caesars? How they had?
Yeah, that's fake news. It's a LeVar Ball / Donald Trump ploy to gain attention, and nope, that whole thing where all press is good press. That's what Little Caesars is going for there. So that's not true. You don't need to worry about that. There is no rat poop in your pizza. It's fine.
All right, so we'll conclude on rat poop then. So thanks as always for firing in the questions for us, and we will catch you guys hopefully later on this week.